Welcome back to the Paul Chandler Show, everyone. I'm your host, Paul Chandler. In tonight's episode, we're going to be using the Padzilla again, and we're going to watch a video of an actual nasal endoscopy procedure being performed. So just for heads up, it's not my nose that we're going to be looking up, but it is a real human being nose. So that way we'll be using the Padzilla to see the camera go up and all the different procedures of the nasal endoscopy. So that way then as the coder, we can correlate to what the doctor did during the procedure to what we'll see in our documentation then that we use for coding. So stay tuned and we'll be right back using the Padzilla, where tonight we'll be exploring nasal endoscopy. Welcome back, everyone. So tonight we're going to be using the Padzilla again, and we're going to be looking at how a nasal endoscopy is surgically performed. Now this, just to warn you, is on a live patient. So with the nasal endoscopy, this is the tool that the provider is going to be sticking up the patient's nose. So notice how long it is. Of course, this is not real life size, because notice it's getting bigger and bigger as it goes in. So with the provider, so this is an example of the doctor's office setup. And now there's several benefits though on why a patient can have a nasal endoscopy being performed. It allows detailed examination of the internal anatomy of the nose itself, help determine any cause of any congestion or obstruction that the patient is having, accurate diagnosis of sinusitis, with sinusitis is an inflammation of the sinuses, help determine any nasal bleeding, say the patient has nosebleeds, to find out where those locations are at, and allows diagnosis of any polyps or nasal tumors that the patient may be experiencing. And also, it does provide a safe minimal discomfort, requires no sedation and no radiation as well. So generally speaking, the patients are awake when this procedure here is actually being performed. But there are several risks for it though. For one, that big thing is going to get stuck up your nose. So it may be discomfort, depending on. The patient may have some nosebleeds during the procedure itself. If they do, they are minor. May cause temporary congestion and a runny nose. But again, the keyword is temporary there. So looking here, now the provider is squirting the patient's nostrils just to liquefy it a little bit to that way provide lubrication, because you have something that is long and solid going in, that way squeezes back a little bit more. Oh, look at all of that nose hair the patient has. Yeah, we do have nose hair as humans. So the scope will be going back through after we get past through the nose hairs going in. And now notice there, oh, isn't that cute mucus? Yeah, we have that as well. So, and right there, in this case, the provider sees a possible tumor or polyp that needs to be removed. But then remembering though too, as far as when the provider is putting the scope through the nose, just besides the fact that they're going back to farther in the nose, we also have 4 different sinuses that are attached to the respiratory system. The frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary sinus. So then when the provider is doing the scopes, unless they're just doing through the nose itself, then the provider will be going in and retracting the scope out and then going back and forth to catch the sinuses as well. So then based on the different location here, so we see here is pretty clear going farther back, and it is pretty lubricated already. So this would be a clean checkout. So then the provider notice though has the scope off to the patient's side. So then while the patient is having the procedure done there, and she's awake by the way, the doctor's looking at a screen off to the side. So in this case now, that lovely, what the doctor looked at earlier, a possible tumor or a polyp needs to be removed. So then the provider, notice that now they have 2 things up the patient's nose, the camera itself and then the actual tool to remove the scope. So that is standardly how a nasal endoscopy is being performed. In this case, it started out just as a diagnostic nasal endoscopy, and then the provider used the excision tool to remove a polyp as well. So remembering too that with the nasal endoscopies, sometimes they can just be diagnostic, as in put the camera up and that's it. Other times they can turn into surgical, where you put the camera up, the doctor finds something, then needs to put another tool in there to remove a polyp or a lesion or some type of material possibly. So that's how we do a nasal endoscopy clinically, and I also hope that wasn't too kind of squeamish for you in there. But I do want to thank you for watching this episode of the Paul Chandler Show, and have an awesome rest of your day.